regular verbs, you add sigma. Remember this in chapter 13. You add a sigma to the stem to make it future. Well, in liquid verbs, you don't add a future, you add an epsilon. Now, that's going to make some differences. In fact, what that does, in effect, is make the future of liquid verbs a contract. See? So, there. And then in the paragraph 333, the aorist adds, in the regular verbs, adds sigma alpha. You remember that from chapter 14. And in liquid verbs, it only adds an alpha. So that would make a different form there. So we want to see that in the, on the board and see it in your book. So take a look at Machen, page 151. And you see the forms, paragraph 328. You see krino, krinis, krini, krinumin, ita, and usi. Now, on the board, I have the principal parts of krino, the first three principal parts, the present, the future, and the aorist. Now, the present, as you see there, is being a liquid. There's no difference in the present. Ignore the present as far as that goes. The present will be completely regular. Remember, in the contracts, the present and the imperfect were irregular. There's something happened to them in the contraction. The others are regular. All the other principal parts of contract verbs, the contract made no difference with them. Now, in this case, it's just the opposite. In the liquids, the present is okay. The present and the imperfect are all right. It's when you get to the future and the aorist that we have some question. So I put an uncontracted form up here so you can see what happened. If you want to make krino a future, you put an epsilon on. And then once you get the epsilon with the omega, then you have a contract situation. And you look back at the contract chart that you've made, or the rules, and you see that here is an O vowel with a E vowel, and the O vowel overcomes and forms its own long according to rule 4. So this would be krino. That's the future. So it's really a contract situation in the future. In the aorist, instead of saying a sigma alpha, ekrin sa, it would be hard to say. And that's the reason, language is simply the way people talk. And so people refuse to say that sigma. And so it dropped out. Just the way you're refusing to say whom now when you should. And pretty soon there will be no whom. All we'll have is who. So ekrina, the sigma is no longer there. And so it's just ekrina, the alpha only. And otherwise it declines exactly as you'd expect an aorist to do. So the liquids then are there, and with no problem, I think. Paragraph 335, he shows us the future indicative of imi, and then the other forms in this chapter, 337, 338, and 339. We have them on the board over here. We should take a look at those on the flip chart. You see paragraph 335, eso me, I, te, methas, ta, unde. Now, those are, if you figure consider the S, epsilon sigma, as the stem, then this will be very regular, just like any other primary middle. Right? Now, the only difference is that there's no variable vowel. There's no mistake here. There's no variable vowel supposed to be there. It's just este, not esete. Este. So note that, no variable vowel in the third singular. Then we come to the reflexive pronouns. In paragraph 337, you see the first person reflexive pronoun, of myself. Now, the of myself simply means that I'm speaking of something reflecting back to myself. Of myself. Notice that there are singulars and plurals here, and there are only 3. In most pronouns we have 4, but when you talk about myself, you can't speak about yourself as myself. In other words, you don't have a nominative. You don't say, myself went to the store. Little children do, and it's cute. But with adults, it's not quite cute anymore. So no no nominative there. You never use it in the nominative. So, M of 2, O own, and then no nominative again, no E there, own is us. The same is true for the plural, the feminine of it. Myself could be either masculine or feminine. And so you have is, the genitive, dative, accusative, and then genitive, dative, accusative again. So the first person, myself. The second person is in paragraph 338, se af tu, and that's yourself, and it declines the very same way. And then in the paragraph 339 we have e af tu, which is the third person, and you'll notice there that we have, because it is third person, it can be either masculine, feminine, or neuter, so we have all three of those there. Again, still, no nominative in either one. Now, how can you remember those? Well, first of all, the one that's myself has an M. Myself. M af tu. The one that means yourself has se there, and se is the word for you. So, yourself. The other one is himself. Now, when we used to make that a rough breathing, then the H was himself. But it's the other one. The one that isn't either myself or yourself has to be himself, the third person. Then, we need to talk about how to use these. In paragraph 342, the reflexive pronoun refers back to the subject of the clause. Do you know that most people in English do not use a reflexive pronoun correctly? When you have finished that, you may give it either to George or myself. You hear people say, wrong. Because you is the subject. When you have finished, you may give that to George or, and if you're going to use a reflexive pronoun, it has to be yourself, because you is the subject. That's good English, doesn't sound like it. So, refer back to the subject of the clause. The proper way to say that would be, if you're finished with that, you may give it either to George or me. People are afraid to use me, but that's the proper way. Do not refer the reflexive pronoun back to any other place except the subject of the clause. I do not speak concerning myself. See, myself, I, both are first person. You did not glorify yourself. You, yourself, and so forth. So it refers back to the subject of the clause, and is used in any way that a pronoun can be used, in the genitive, dative, or accusative. Then, in paragraph 336, we have the preparatory there. Now this is English, not Greek. Greek doesn't have any word there. For instance, he says, sometimes the there is put in to postpone the subject. I can say, there is joy in heaven. Well, there is not the subject, and there is not an adverb. Joy is in heaven, is the way it should be said. Joy is in heaven. And the word there really isn't a part of the sentence. It postpones the subject. It's easier to say. We have the same thing with the preparatory it. It is good, or something like that. It would be a preparatory it, postponing the subject until later. Well, in our diagrams, we want to put the subject in the proper place. So look at that illustration in paragraph 336. He says, Kara este en urano. See? There shall be joy in heaven. But actually, joy shall be in heaven. The word there is just superfluous in diagramming or understanding the grammar. There were disciples in the house. The subject is disciples, mathite. See? The disciples were in the house. So the there is an English use, and there's nothing wrong with using it, but don't expect to find it in your diagram. There's nothing in Greek to correspond to that. Now, in paragraph 443, we come to the reciprocal pronoun. Now, reciprocal is allelon, of one another. Reciprocal simply means one to another, back and forth. We talk about reciprocal agreements between one country and another. They have a reciprocal trade agreement or whatever. For a little while back, a couple of years back, the word reciprocity was right on everybody's lips. It seemed like everywhere I went, somebody was talking about reciprocity. I don't know, maybe it was in the Reader's Digest Build Your Vocabulary thing that week or something. But you hear it a lot. Reciprocity comes from this. A reciprocal pronoun simply means of one another, of what you and of I, of what you and I are sharing. To or for one another, and one another. So it's only used in the plural, of course. You can't have of one another You can't have one another if you don't have if you only have one. So you must have at least two. So it'd only be plural. You can't have it in the nominative. So it only leaves you three forms: allelon, and allelus, allelis, and then allelus. So those three forms in the plural: genitive, dative, and accusative. Now, in the exercises, let me caution you about a couple of things. I can tell you one thing. In number 1 in the exercises, that's almost a direct quote out of 2 Corinthians 4:5. You may want to look that up in your Greek New Testament, 2 Corinthians 4:5 for number 1. And then the last word in number 5, sparen, that is an aorist passive. An aorist passive. So get that squared away in your mind, and you'll find the form of the aorist passive in the vocabulary. It's next to the last word. And you can see there, esparin. Sparen is the aorist passive participle, so it wouldn't have a augment. And I think you can figure it out once you know that. It's the nominative neuter singular of the aorist passive participle of spiro. But you could look long and hard before you found that one, I think. Now, 1 John. We have the next two verses of 1 John diagrammed. Remember, you are parsing these, and you're parsing the verbs. You're diagramming the verse, and you are writing it out. So, this is verse 3. We announce to you also. Now the cat there really modifies imin. So you don't put the cat over anywhere else. It's a use that we found in previously in Machen, meaning also. So we announce also to you, and it modifies imin. We announce to you, line there, separating the subject from the verb. You know, it's artistic, did you? We announce what? What do we announce? We announce that which we have seen and heard. Right? We have seen and heard that which. So that's what we announce. And it's a little bit, remember the relative pronoun is not easy to grasp in diagramming, but this relative is the object of these two verbs. And then this whole clause then is telling what we announce. That's what we announce, see? So it's the relative pronoun acting as a noun. Then we do that. Why? For what purpose? Ina. In order that. Ina with the subjunctive. So this verb then is going to be subjunctive. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 verbs already. In order that you also may have fellowship with us. Now I say may because this is a present tense verb. That's why we're saying may. In order that, this is purpose, in order that you may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship, imetera, you probably found by just looking up in the back of the book. That's a pronoun, a possessive pronoun. Our fellowship is, and then we had to add this. Sometimes you have to add the to be verb in Greek. We did this, remember, in chapter 6. The word is good. We added the is. So here we're adding the is here in this estin. Our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son. Now, this Isu Christou simply restates the Son in another way. So this is what we call in a positive. We had this also in paragraph 105 in Machen. With His Son, who is Jesus Christ. So that's verse 3. And verse 4, we have an interesting construction. We write these things. Now, in Machen, we normally added a things out here. You really don't need it. That was a kind of to get you used to it, that this is a neuter plural. But we write tafta, these things, in order that your joy, and look at this, wow. this is you might note that is to be, the subjunctive of me, of the to be verb. And there's no line here because this is like a complementary participle. We had complementary infinitives, you remember, in paragraph 398, or 298. And now we have a complementary participle. This is called a periphrastic, which means that we have a to be verb with a participle. And the point of the periphrastic is a continuation of something. Now, literally speaking then, in order that your joy may be in a condition of having been filled up and still being full. It's kind of hard to put all that in a translation, but that's what he's saying. And that's why when versions say it, they'll say, in order that your joy may be full. Well, that's true, but in order that your joy may be in a condition of having been filled up and remaining full. Now that's a full translation, if you don't mind. So, purpose clause, participle, perfect. See the te, the reduplication, perfect participle, and you'll parse that too. So you have two to parse there and one here. Parse it on your parsing sheet so you can keep track of what we have here. Now we'll come back next time. We'll keep on doing two each lesson. Now, in the classroom where we meet 3 times a week, we can do more. We'll do 2 each class time, so we get a little farther along on that. But for the most part, you're getting all the constructions, and you'll be able to go on and do this on your own. And if you'd like to, work on it ahead now. But I expect you have plenty to do with this. So keep on going with that. The next time we'll do verses 5 and 6 in 1 John, and then we'll do chapter 25. This is the lesson 25, the third declension, which, as you remember, is that tough declension, the one that gives us the trouble. We had some of these in lesson 17, and now we get more nouns of the third declension, and then adjectives of the third declension as well. The vocabulary is on page 157. Alethis s is an adjective which means true. Now this has only 2 forms, as you see, alethis and alethes. And the alethis is masculine and feminine, and the alethes is the neuter. We'll see that in a little while. Anir andros, a man. This is man as distinguished from woman, while the anthropos that we had before is man as a human being, distinguished from all other beings. Archierefs and archiereos, a chief priest. Basilephs, basileos, a king, and you see those 2 words are of the same declension. Yenos, yenus, a race or a kind. Grammatefs, grammateos, a scribe. Ethnos, ethnus, a nation. And then ta ethna would be the nations or the Gentiles. Erefs, ereos, a priest. Miter, mitros, a mother. And oros, orus, a mountain. Pater, patros, a father. Pistis, pisteos, faith. And we had pistevo, to place your faith in. This is the noun faith. Pistis, pisteos, faith. Pleris, pleres, adjective, full. The same kind of adjective as we have with alethis. And polis, poleos, a city. And charis, charitos, grace. Now, that's the vocabulary, and there really isn't much in this chapter except what he says. There are some more forms. So this is a good chance for you to catch up on your vocabulary, on your forms. Work hard on this. Get these squared away in your mind, because these forms will continue to come up. They come in the New Testament. This is not an isolated academic situation here. We're looking forward to using these in the New Testament. So, in paragraph 347, you see the first list of forms, cautis, and you'll hear these on the cassette tape, so I don't really need to go over these as much as I want you to memorize them, not the endings, as we did with 17. Remember, we did the whole word, and that's the simplest way to do it, I think. And sometimes if you want to emphasize the endings, then your accenting will not be quite as good, but that's worth it. Go ahead and do it. Cautis, cauditos, cauditi, caudin, caudites, cauditone, caudisi, cauditas. See, emphasizing those endings. Learn them that way, and you'll hear them on the tape in that way. In paragraph 349, polis, poleos, poli, polin, polis, poleon, polesi, polis. The word for city, which is a feminine, and you again remember in the third declension, you can't tell whether words are masculine, feminine, or neuter. You have to look at the lexicon. You have to know it, simply know it. In paragraph 352, we have the declension of yenos, a race, and this is a neuter. Therefore, you only see three forms. Again, I suggest that you take that accusative and put it down there, and write yenos at the bottom, so you have yenos, yenus, yeni, yenos. Yeni, yenon, yenesi, yeni. Get the four forms, because you're used to that. Would be better. Now, these other paragraphs, he's just saying, this is why it's this way or that way. For my part, you simply learn it, and that's all you need. Then basilephs, basileos, remember we had about 3 words in that section on this, so they all follow the declension of basilephs, basilephs, basileos, basili, basilea. Forget the vocative, we don't need that. And then basilis, basileon, basilephsi, and basilis. Again, listen to the tape, learn them that way. Then in paragraph 360, we have alithis, alithes, and again the masculine and feminine are the same, and then the neuter is different. Alithis, alithus, alithi, alithi. Learn them by rote, get them squared away in your mind. Now, something I neglected to say the last couple of sessions, and that is that once we start doing 1 John, you really could cut down on your homework some. Maybe do 5 or 6 or 7 instead of doing 10, 12. So cut down on it, and then do the work in 1 John. Speaking of 1 John, we have the verses 5 and 6 for today, and you'll see them here on the board. This, remember this is the demonstrative pronoun from paragraph 104 of Machen. This is the message. Now, you have to say, well, where does the OT clause fit in? Well, this, that is, that God is light and darkness is not in him at all, is the message. See? So the only way I know to do that is to make it as in a positive. This is the message. And if he were pointing, you can do that. This is the message. So this, and then you have your OT clause then used as a noun, as in a positive with afti. And then God is light. Notice the mark this way, because estin is a linking verb, and phos is looking back here and completing the meaning of the verb, and is nominative because estin takes the nominative. And then God is light and darkness is not in him at all. Now you may consider this as an adjective and say no darkness at all is in him. I think that's a possibility, because after all, mia is the word for one. Not one darkness is possible, but it's also possible for it to be there as an adverb. Darkness is not in him at all, in that sense. This is the message. Now, what is the message? The message which. See the relative pronoun here? That is feminine, and it's singular. This is feminine singular. So it agrees in gender and number, and that's what a pronoun is supposed to do. So that tells us that we're talking about the message, that is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, or announce to you. So this is modifying then. The relative pronoun is modifying, the relative clause is modifying the angalia. Okay? So your verbs then are estin twice, put it down twice, separate line, because then if we're grading these, we need to see everybody had the same verb. So 3 estins, in fact, and then akikomen and anangelamen. Put them in the order of the text rather than the order of the diagram, of course. And next verse, verse 6. This is an interesting verse. This is where it starts in the text. If, remember, this is the protasis, and that's the apodosis. The protasis is if we say, then we have another OT clause, used as a noun, object of a verb of saying. This is not unusual. This is indirect discourse with the OT. If we say that we have fellowship with him, and we are walking in the darkness, if that's true, then we are lying, and we are not doing the truth. It's a good point that John makes. We are really not having fellowship with him if we're walking in darkness. We're just lying, kidding ourselves. We're lying to ourselves, lying to others. And we're not doing the truth that God expects us to do. So John's very convicting. Don't get hung up in the Greek and forget that John is saying something very significant to us. That if we are saying and if we are supposed to be in the light, then we better act like it. And we'll see that even more so in verses 7 and 8 next time when we do chapter 26. Lesson 26 gives us the numbers and some additional uses of prepositional phrases and some genitives and accusatives and so forth. So what we're going to do this time is, after we've done the vocabulary, we'll look at page 5A, so get that ready, and we'll be bringing that up to date on the uses of the cases. Lesson 26, vocabulary, page 163. Here's the vocabulary. Theo, 2. Theo, 2. We do that with a duo kind of thing. Theo, 2. Is mia n is 1. Is mia n, 1. X is an indeclinable word for 6. We talk about a hexagon, 6-sided figure. It comes from this word, X, 6. Etos, etus, do, a year. E, conjunction, or. Ethelon, imperfect of thelo. Now this is seems irregular because you'd expect, according to paragraph 125, that if a word begins with a consonant, to augment it in the imperfect, you simply put on an epsilon. Well, this is apparently irregular in that sense. Eta instead of epsilon. Iakobos, James. Iakobos, James. Katharos, aon, clean or pure. Megas, megali, mega, great. Now this word, if you say it without too much looking at the accents, it might sound like a Spanish or an Irish word. Megas, megali, mega. And that would be a real fine Irish word there. We have the Italian prophet, Malachi, so we have a little bit for everybody. This is our Irish word, megas, megali, mega, which means great. Me this, me the mia, me then, no one or nothing. And this is with moods other than the indicative. With the indicative you'll see later on. Oligos, E-O, little or few. Then udis, udemia, uden, no one or nothing. And remember we had that already in 1 John. Udemia, there is not one darkness in him at all. Pas, upon, adjective, all or every. And then my favorite word, pendekis kilii. Pendekis kilii is the word for 5,000. If you want to impress somebody, that's the word to use. Pende, the word for 5. Plethos, plethus, do, a multitude. Polis, poli, adjective meaning much or many. We get our word polyunsaturates from this. Palis, pali, pali. Much or many. Pous, podos, a foot. Stadion, though, is the word for stadium or furlong. It's interesting that the stadium is on Stadiou Street in Athens, the big soccer stadium there. Tesseres, four. Tris, tria, the word for three. And then os, as, and with numerals about. So os will be used in two ways. As an adverb, and then with numerals it will be about, and it will be used as a preposition, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Now the forms, there are three sets of forms in this chapter. Make that two. There are some that are not in the chapter they're referred to. The forms for pas, pasapan, the word pan, of course, you know, Pan American is the All-American airline. This word that gets from this word here, pan, all. So pas, pasapan declines in the masculine and neuter just like the third declension, and in the feminine like the first declension, like doxa. So you shouldn't have a problem with those. Pas, bandas, bandi, banda, bandas, bandom, si, bandas. Right on down the line. Then the forms of, in paragraph 371, the numerals is, mia, en, this is the word for one. You should note there the slight irregularities with this word, is, mia, en. The irregularities are in the accenting. This is, again, very much like the third, it is third declension in the masculine and neuter, and in the feminine, it is first declension. Then we have the other paragraphs that need a little bit of explanation. For instance, the uses of pas, paragraph 367, 68, and 69. It isn't easy to nail pas down. I had one teacher one time who said pas means all, and that's all means all, and that's all means. Well, not all the time. The paragraph 367, if pas is in the predicate position, that means it doesn't have the article, and it's used with a noun that does have the article, passa e polis, that would be all the city, all the city. Paragraph 368, if it's used in the attributive position, e passa polis, the whole city, or e pandis mathite, all the disciples, or the whole body of the disciples. 369, pas used often means every, pan oras, every mountain. And so what I'm saying is that you'll find it in various uses, and it doesn't always mean all. It can mean every, it can mean the whole, etc. Then in the paragraph 376, we have some new diagramming. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me do 372 to 75. You see the numbers there. You have them already in the vocabulary. I just want to point them out. That we have theo there, indeclinable. Then you have tris tria, and tesseres, tessera, 4. And they're found. The forms are found in paragraph 588. And then the other numbers he mentions, paragraph 375. Now, the diagramming. Up until now, we've said the prepositional phrase can be used